I've been playing around with the idea for a new game mode for WarThunder. It will have constant respawns with average round times estimated to be around 15 to 20 minutes. The game mode will be a hybrid of classic game modes such as Payload and Control Point. The battle will be open to tanks, planes and ships, full on combined arms, although the main emphasis will be on tanks. One team will be attacking and the other defending. It will be 16v6 across all types of forces. That's a total of 92 players active on one map. If the WarThunder engine cannot easily handle more than 64 players per map, we could always drop the player count down to make it 10v10 for a total of 60 players in one map. The situation I've been thinking of is D-Day, but with a bit of artistic license. The attacking team will be the Axis and the defenders will be the Allies. The aim of the Axis team is to escort the payload throughout the map. Once the payload reaches its destination, it becomes a control point that will need to be contested. The payload is a railway gun, a 28cm K5 to be exact. The destination is a firing turntable. The 28cm K5 will need to fire one shell for the Axis team to win. What is the K5 firing at? An offshore British battleship. If the battleship survives to the end of the round, the Allies win. It takes only one shot from the K5 for the battleship to be destroyed and for the Axis team to win. I know this is a lot of info, I'm just trying to bring my point across. We're going to go deeper into the mechanics of this game mode and how a round will flow. The payload is a 28cm K5 railway gun. It is pushed forward by a locomotive behind it. We're going to have to throw the history book out of the window for how the railway gun would have operated in real life. Just discard the lack of people and ammunition wagons. A reason why the train won't have ammunition wagons is due to the long profile of the payload. The K5 is close to 35 meters long and has a tall profile. The K5 will be pushed by a Kriegs locomotive, specifically the DRB Class 52. The locomotive is famous for being one of the most produced German locomotives throughout World War II. Over 7,000 of them were made. Its name roughly translates to war locomotive. It's also rather striking with the frontal plates protruding near the front and other protective metals along its length. The locomotive is close to 22 meters long. With the locomotive and the K5, that's around 55 meters of train. To put the length into perspective, a Panzer IV is 6 meters long. A Sherman M4 is also around 6 meters long, depending on which variant. The payload will make it difficult for the defending team to kill the attacking team. This is due to the large silhouette and length of the payload. Allied team members camping at long ranges will only be able to engage targets that aren't blocked out by the long profile of the payload. Balancing this may be an issue. One possible solution could be to put a flatbed car between the payload and the locomotive. This would increase the length of the train but open up a sightline between the two large objects. Another possible balancing idea could be to use a much shorter diesel locomotive. This will shorten the length of the payload, but in my view is far less stylish. The third balancing idea could be to remove any locomotive out of the picture completely. Less realistic, but for the sake of balance it is an option. Payload mechanics. The payload is indestructible to anything, be it bombardment or ground fire. The payload will only move forward if Axis team members are nearby. This speed will increase if there are more Axis team members nearby. This effect will top out at a maximum of 3 Axis players. If an Allied team member enters the area near the payload will stop. When the Allied player is killed or leaves the area around the payload, it will start moving again. I'm ripping the payload mechanics straight out of Team Fortress 2 and Overwatch. Even the mechanic where if the payload is abandoned for around 30 seconds by the Axis team, it begins to slowly roll backwards. This speed is normally around half the speed of one attacking member pushing the payload. To encourage being close to the payload, other games have their payloads dispense health. Our payload will be dispensing ammunition, just like a normal cap point in WarThunder. Unlike normal cap points, the payload should be able to dispense ammo while the tank is on the move, a feature that cap points in WarThunder do not offer. At the moment in WarThunder, you have to be static in a cap point to be able to rearm. Map design. Please bear in mind I'm not a map designer. This map is just a placeholder that can be used as a framework when building the game mode. The map will be based on the region of northern France, specifically the area around Pointe du Hoc. To mix up the gameplay, we're going to need to add some flavour to the map, and this is where I propose 3 stages to the map with checkpoints. These checkpoints are new forward spawning areas for the attackers and fallback areas for the defenders. The spawn points will change depending on which checkpoint the payload is at. The first stage of the map will be large open fields with small hedgerows and stone walls. Scattered about will be small houses and farm buildings resembling the typical French countryside of northern France. The second stage will have the payload pass through a small town's train station. The nature of this built-up area will bring the combat into close quarters. The railway line will be passing just on the outskirts of the town. The size of the town is not too big, somewhere in the region of slightly bigger than the town on Poland, but smaller than the Eastern Europe map town. The third stage will be near the coast, with the terrain resembling the area around Point de Hoc. There will be a wooden area on one side of the tracks in the distance. The area around the train line will be scattered around with deep craters from the shelling on the final point. These craters will allow mid-range combat from dips in the terrain. Also scattered about will be pillboxes and other concrete bunkers to add additional cover of sorts in this open terrain. Don't worry about the size of those craters you're seeing in the background footage, they won't be that deep in the map. The reason for the 3 stages of the map is to change the fighting dynamic throughout the map, so that playstyles will have to change as the match goes along. The first stage will resemble the WarThunder maps Fields of Normandy and Curse. The second stage will handle like Eastern Europe and Poland. The third stage will resemble the beach area on Normandy and the middle ground on Carpathians. Once the payload has reached its objective, which is the turntable, the K5 will begin to prepare firing at the battleship. The locomotive will detach and reverse back the way it came, completely uninterruptible. The base of the turntable will turn to face the gun at the battleship. That is if WarThunder's game engine can handle a model being on top of another model that is rotating. The gun needs to fire 1 round to kill the ship. It will take 4 minutes of loading to fire the round. The payload is now a control point. The gun will only go through the loading process when the Axis players are nearby. If an allied player enters the cap point at any time, the cap point will be contested and the loading will stop. If only allied players are on the objective, the loading process will not reverse. The allies can only halt the loading of the gun, not reverse it. A symbol floating above the control point will indicate how far the gun is into the loading process. If possible, it would be nice to model the loading of the K5, but I can understand the cost of animating the model. That goes for having also crew members on the gun, like our classic Hans and Klaus. The only thing that would definitely need to be animated is the gun elevating before it fires. Not only is it also part of the firing process, but it's a way to visually show to both teams that the match is almost over. The first 2 checkpoints on the map will have the spawn points between the Allies and Axis players roughly even. The capture point around the turntable will have the Allies spawning closer than the Axis. This makes every moment that the Axis can clear the point of Allies even more precious. There is an overall timer on this game mode. Each checkpoint that the train gets to increases the time allowed before failure for the Axis team. The payload's destination at the turntable will always have a fixed set of time. For example, when the game starts, the Axis players have 5 minutes to reach checkpoint 1. An additional 5 minutes is rewarded when reaching this checkpoint. When the Axis team reaches the next checkpoint, they are awarded another 5 minutes to push for the final point. Once the payload reaches its destination, the clock is reset and the Axis have a maximum of 7 minutes to fire 1 round. The times are just a rough estimate. To balance the time better, the game mode will need to be prototyped to figure out what times should be used. If at any point the time runs out, but there is still an Axis player close to the payload or control point area, the match enters overtime. The round will continue until there is no longer an Axis player in the area, at which point the Allies will win. Depending on how balancing works, it may be interesting to add a catch-up mechanic. If the Axis team is pushing the payload too fast, to a point where the Allied team is getting stomped, one method to even out the battle is to have the offshore battleship fire a salvo directly at the payload. The Axis team will be made aware that a heavy bombardment is incoming. 10 seconds later, shelling will commence. The warning is to give Axis players time to fall back from the payload and not to feel like they died for no good reason. The shelling can resemble a standard artillery call-in, but with the addition of much larger explosions than the usual artillery call-in. Hopefully Gaijin can program the artillery to have bomb physics. It would be amazing to see a poor Panzer IV that was tracked get flipped over by offshore artillery. The battleship will only ever fire one salvo, and it is only if the allied team is getting defeated at an alarming rate. I dedicated most of my time to talking about only the tank element of gameplay. Now it's time to talk about planes and ships. One thing I should add is that a player has to choose a force and stick with it, e.g. picking the Air Force or the Ground Forces. The player will only have access to their chosen range of vehicles for the duration of the mission. Let's talk about planes. Planes, just like tanks, will have constant respawning on. It is the role of planes to support the ground forces and ships. With pilots being able to spawn in at the get-go, tankers will be encouraged to deploy in SPAAs. Just in general, it would be interesting to see what planes players will choose. Will pilots choose to only take ground attack aircraft to go and ground pound targets? Will they take bombers to attack the ground targets from further away and also to carry additional ordnance? Maybe they'll take out fighters to engage all the other easy to kill ground attack aircraft and the bombers. I think there'll be a healthy balance between the types of planes that are flown out in this game mode. Only testing on a prototype map will let us know if the planes would work in this game mode. If the issue of CAS or close air support is a really bad issue in the testing, then we may need to introduce a limit to the amount of players on one team that can spawn in CAS aircraft. It seems that planes are an afterthought in this game mode as they don't really have a role, at least one not as exciting as ground forces. Isn't that the point of planes, to support the ground forces? I think it would be rather nice to see planes and tanks spawning in on the same battlefield. Each team will have a main airfield which they spawn at. The spawn points will not change throughout the match. The main bases will have a long, paved landing strip. The locations of each base will be east and west of the main combat zone, with their access being to the east and the allies to the west. Each base will be guarded by AA, just like in a standard air-only RB match. Its purpose is to give the enemy team second thoughts when they want to follow you back over your base. There will also be a smaller air base close to the front lines. This base will have a much smaller landing strip, and it's not even paved, just dirt. This base will be significantly shorter than the main one. There will also be no AA guns. If a pilot chooses to use the small base, they have to weigh up the risks and reward before they land there. It could be risky due to the proximity to the front lines, and also the short length of the landing strip can make it tricky to land at. It could also be very rewarding, saving precious minutes flying back to the main base for rearming or repairs. One gimmick we can add for planes is to have a British carrier based very close to the operations zone. Only planes that are configured for carrier-based operations are allowed to use the spawn point. The spawn point will be the fastest way for planes to get into the fight. The carrier will be a prime target for enemy ships, and this is where ships come in. As the ships are duking it out, the carrier will be a prime target for them to attack. The carrier is not a mission critical objective, but if it is sunk, the Axis team will gain points. The points will be allocated to players when they deal damage in proportion to how much damage done. The carrier will start from the allied naval spawn point and start moving towards the middle of the point between both the Axis team and the allied team's naval spawn points. The carrier will encourage ships to be fighting in a smaller area, and with the proximity to the ships fighting close to the aircraft carrier, planes will also be hunting for ships. Skirmishes will be breaking out between the boats and the planes, which will be rather interesting to see. The aircraft carrier might also be a worthy target for torpedo boats, encouraging them to leave the shallows and try to sink the massive ship. The carrier is not fast and has a wide profile, an ideal target for torpedo boats. Me personally, I don't have a clue how the naval area of the map will look. If we look at Gaijin's Naval Forces map design, their maps have been set in an archipelago of small islands, where areas of land block sightlines to allow ship combat to take place at closer ranges. I don't know how Naval Forces map design is going, and I don't think Gaijin knows either. That is why they're running tests on Naval Forces and tweaking the formula until they can get something right. Now there's one topic we can't avoid, RP gain. How do we balance the gain of research points in this game mode? The game mode I've been talking about has continuous respawns. In Air RB, there are no respawns. In Tank RB, you have to earn points by doing actions. These points allow you to buy yourself back into the battle again in a different vehicle. In this game mode, I think the best way to balance RP gain is to change nothing. Nothing at all. What I'm about to say could be wrong, but I do have 1000 hours in WarThunder, so it's just a feeling I have. I think there is a cap on how much RP you can earn in each round. I'm talking about the RP earned before premium and boosters. Just forget about premium and boosters for now, that's just going to complicate stuff. It feels like in some rounds of WarThunder Ground Forces, you can get 2 kills and earn around 3000 RP. The next round you get 7 kills and you get around 3500 RP. That doesn't feel right. This soft cap to RP earning could work fine if implemented into this game mode. There are still questions about this game mode that need to be answered, such as, Iron, if I have unlimited respawns, what is my incentive not to spawn in close air support aircraft and just ram my plane into enemy tanks? Well, I'm glad you asked that because I thought of a possible solution to this. The last few weeks I've been playing a game called Heliborne. The game is about heli v heli combat with elements of ground support and transport. In a round of Heliborne, the opposing teams duke it out to contest capture points around the map. In Heliborne, players are only allowed to bring 3 helis into each match. In Heliborne, the helis are infinitely respawning, but have respawn timers. This system is to discourage players from spamming their rockets and ramming enemies. If you play around normally, you will never have an issue with spawning back in after dying, as always one of your 3 helis is repaired and ready to go. In WarThunder, this could be applied to this game mode by allowing only 3 of each vehicle of your chosen faction to enter the battle. If a player rams their vehicles and spams ordnance, they will find out after 3 planes that they're twiddling their thumbs and waiting for around 2 minutes for one of their planes to finish repairing. Another question that needs to be addressed is what sense of pride and accomplishment am I meant to feel as a person playing planes or ships and the team I'm on loses? If you're in ground forces in a tank, at least you know you tried your best to try and do the objective. With ships and planes, it's possible to feel like you tried your best and you even got to the top of the leaderboards, but you still lost due to other players fighting over an objective you can't contribute to. It can be argued that planes can support the ground forces by fighting for air supremacy over the control point. How can a ship player be happy to lose in this game mode? They don't influence the control point. They can shoot down planes near the control point and they can fight over the carrier spawn. Those 2 things don't massively influence the objective though. Maybe this game mode will be better as a ground forces and air map only. I don't know. I'm sure that there are many flaws with this game mode's design at the moment, but I'm hoping with feedback from you, the viewers, that we can refine this game mode into something new and innovative. I'm tired of Team Deathmatch in WarThunder. WarThunder is an awesome game, but it needs a new game mode, something to mix up the gameplay. The last thing I want to emphasize before I finish this off is just because my game idea is in a vid, doesn't make me right. I'm just some bloke that has chucked some ideas at a wall and saw what sticked. There are many people that have suggested ideas on the forums for this game, all of which are good ideas. Some are also very terrible. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and I look forward to reading your comments below on your views. I want to extend a big thank you for the 2 artists that made art for this video. Maddendd for making the thumbnail, and Tim's for making the map and tank silhouettes. Maddendd has a YouTube channel and there's a link for that below the video. Tim's doesn't have a YouTube channel yet, but he is on Twitter, so a link for that is also down below. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video and thank you for watching.
Like, comment and subscribe or I'll break your f***ing legs.